welcome back to the Horror Master YouTube channel. Welcome back to day number 24. Jesus, 24 days in a row, man. Like I said, my insanity, you're slowly seeing my insanity going deeper, deeper, deeper into the oblivion. But you know what? I've been having a lot of fun doing this series, guys. And believe me, even though we're almost to the very end of the series, we still have a long way to go for the series to end. So for episode 24, we're going to be tackling another franchise that I'm not much of a fan of, but I can appreciate what it tried to do for certain films, and that is the Leprechaun franchise. Yeah, who would have thought a leprechaun in a horror film, in a horror as a horror icon? Who would have thought? I mean, then again, we have Chucky, who is almost the same time as fucking Leprechaun, but again, Leprechaun has more magic powers. I think that's the perfect way I can say it. But it's Leprechauns one of those franchises that, yes, it is in the horror franchise, but it's mostly close to the comedy side of horror, kind of like a scary movie franchise. Which I should have done that in this series. I might do that for a video sometime in the future. Let me know that I come see what I'm gonna do that. But the Leprechaun franchise is one of those franchises that a lot of people really don't talk about. Like I said before, I'm not the biggest Leprechaun fan in the universe. I know my one of my cousin's daughters. She loves the Leprechaun for some reasons, but regardless, Leprechaun is one of those, unbeknownst to me, one of those few horror icons that really doesn't get that much appreciation because, like I said before, maybe because it's a bit more comedy than horror. Then it's kind of in the middle of those two genres, film genres. So it all depends on your perspective. But regardless, let's get to ranking. We have 8 films to talk about. So at number 8, at the bottom of the barrel, and I mean the very deep, undeniable, disgusting, rotten, stinking bottom of the barrel, we have Leprechaun 4 in space. I've talked about how some horror film, how you're trying to take a horror, human-based horror, or hell, supernatural horror per individual like Leprechaun and take it up in space. Like the concept, I was like, what? What in the world are you doing that? Like I mentioned before with Jason in my Jason X review, you take a human-based slasher, put it in space. It doesn't make fucking sense. The only exceptions that horror has in space is the Alien franchise or even the Predator franchise. With Leprechaun 4, when I was watching this film, I was like, oh dear fucking god, end this already. I was not a big fan of this film. To this day, I'm not the biggest fan of this film. Like, I tried years ago watching it, and I was like, didn't like it. And then it's been years I've seen it, and I was like, you know what? Let me give it a second shot. Nope, still the same shit that I had before. Still the same as I have today. It is one of those films that I try so much to forget about, but sometimes it haunts my fucking dreams. Do you believe that? But regardless, to me, at the very bottom of the barrel, Leprechaun 4 in space. At number 7, we have Leprechaun in the Hood. So, in the Hood films, they're kind of interesting because you no longer have Leprechaun going up in space. No, 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 no. Now you have him go to the ghetto and the hood, and I'm like, what? Again, it's one of those concepts that I'm like, I want to know who in the hell was in the writing process that it would be a great idea for Leprechaun to be in the hood, which I'm like, I don't know. I mean, regardless, regardless, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of the Leprechaun franchise in neither of this film. But Leprechaun in the Hood is one of those films that I can appreciate what they were trying to do. Has a bit of more comedy than horror, to be honest. So it's kind of like, yeah. Then again, Leprechaun's been kind of a bit more of the funny, more horror icon. So again, I can understand what they were going for, but to me, the execution wasn't really the best. At number 6, we have Leprechaun Back to the Hood. Now, the reason this is a bit higher than the original Leprechaun in the Hood was because at least the comedy in this film was a bit better than the comedy in the first film. So, for those reasons, it's a bit higher. Again, the kills are really the aggressive. I don't think there's even a kill. Maybe there might be one. Like I said, these films kind of like went over my head. So, like I said, nothing against those films. In the Hood films are some of the most underrated films that I think from the entire Leprechaun franchise. They're way better than the fucking Leprechaun in space. I'll tell you that much. But it just those films, especially Back to the Hood, it really didn't captivate me what Leprechaun actually is. Maybe it's just maybe someone out there might be their favorite films in the Leprechaun franchise. Which let me know down in the comments. I want to know your guys' opinion about those films. But same thing you kind of said about Leprechaun in the Hood applies to Leprechaun Back in the Hood. At number five, we have Leprechaun 2. And I'll say it once and I'll say it again. Usually the second film is always the one, it's one of the most critical films when you're gonna be building up a franchise or a universe. With Leprechaun 2, it was kind of a success at first, but wasn't the major success. As an example, like something like maybe Child's Play 2 or Jeepers Creepers 2. I mean, don't get me wrong, it has its fan base, and I can appreciate that film. But when you go from the first Leprechaun to Leprechaun 2, some of that spark kind of went away because what made it special about the first Leprechaun, they really didn't translate into Leprechaun 2. But again, not the worst film you're ever gonna see. Trust me, it's one of those films that as time has gone on and has become a bit more of an appreciation, more of a more underrated film in the horror and the Leprechaun franchise. And it's a film that I might suggest any Leprechaun fan or anyone's interested in the franchise to at least give it a try. It's one of those films that you might appreciate for what it is. At number four, we have Leprechaun Returns. This is the latest installment in the Leprechaun franchise, and this takes place maybe 25 years after the original. So it's kind of a bit of a kind of ignores the other Leprechaun films and kind of goes back and forth into this timeline. Kind of like the Halloween franchise kind of did that with the new films, almost the same thing. But regardless, Leprechaun Returns is it's 25 years after the original, and in this iteration, Leprechaun comes back, and of course this time, Jennifer Aniston's daughter, who is the protagonist of this film, kind of goes against Leprechaun and remembers everything Leprechaun did and all that. Again, it's one of those films that really didn't. I wasn't really much in the wares that they actually made a Leprechaun brand new film because, like I said, I'm not really much the biggest Leprechaun fan. But I gotta say, they kind of almost tried this. They almost made it point on point to the original. Even the script was kind of almost the same, which they almost kind of copy and paste pretty much from the original to Return. So that kind of makes it down a bit lower on the list. But a really enjoyable film and a film that I might actually enjoy a bit better as time goes on. It depends on my mood right now. But regardless, Leprechaun Returns is at my number four. At number three, surprisingly, I have it higher on the list. We have Leprechaun Origins. Now, the reason I have it higher on the list is because, first of all, this was one of the first films that WWE was trying to kind of expand more the horizons. Of course, they kind of try to do that with the movie The Call. If you all guys remember that movie, which is a fucking great film, very underrated film nobody talks about. So WWE was trying to move past trying to move into the movie side of things, more cinematic, if that's the perfect way I can say it. And with Leprechaun Origins, the reason I like this movie a lot, and I could have easily made it my number two, but at number three fits better, is because this film, it has still some comedy moments, but its focus, it's more horror, more dark, more evil. They even made Leprechaun, played by Hornswoggle, the wrestler. He portrays the Leprechaun to the most of his abilities and make him more evil, more disgusting. Like I said, this film has been more of a darker film what I actually expected for be a Leprechaun film, even though, like I said, Leprechaun's more associated with like more of the comedy side of things. And they try to do something different with Origins, which I can appreciate because, like I said, I like my horror and comedy, but sometimes it's a bit too much. I'm not saying it's always not always gonna work. It can work if you done it in a way, but with Origins, they had it, but it was focused more on the horror, darker side of things. It's kind of like the first Evil Dead had some comedy moments, but with Origins, I believe that they actually execution it to the fullest, and I'm excited to see they continue from this story. And like I said, I thought Origins was a really great film. Like I said, it kind of tried to reboot the entire franchise, and afterwards, of course, later on to make Leprechaun Returns, we really didn't make that well. But with Origins, I was really a fan of, to be honest. and I do believe that eventually people will appreciate this more a bit better. At number two, we have Leprechaun 3. Now, Leprechaun 3, I think, is one of the craziest films in terms of Leprechaun franchise. This is where Leprechaun kind of went more off the wheels. That's a perfect way I can say it. Like I said, and I'll say it once, I'll say it again. Not the biggest fan of the franchise, but this one just went completely nuts. I mean, there's some moments in the film that actually made me jump scare. Like, what the fuck was that? Of course, still keeping with the whole comedy side of things, but it was appropriate for this film. I don't know, for some reason, this film, the comedy kind of fit the film, maybe because of the script and all that. But regardless, it is one of the craziest films in the Leprechaun franchise, and a franchise that, like I said before, I'm not the biggest fan of, but I can appreciate it. And this film is like, woo, crazy, crazy, crazy. If you haven't seen Leprechaun 3, I suggest you all to watch it just for the hell of it. And of course, at number one, we have the original Leprechaun. I remember watching this film when I was late to the party in this one. I think I must have been like maybe 19, 20 years old when I saw this film. And when you have Jennifer Aniston, of course, her filmography debut, of course, there, because she was in France and all that. I mean, I really like this film because the comedy is well written, the jokes are well written. Leprechaun's role in this film is so good, of course. Give me my pot of gold. I mean, it's the first film. Usually, the first one in a franchise is usually the best one. Not always. Usually, the sequel is the better one of the franchise. It all depends. But being that it was the first film, it was the film that has the more critical reviews, because this is gonna be either a money maker or a bank breaker. And thankfully, this was able to make some bucks for, of course, the later Leprechaun films. Even though like I said before, I fucking hate Leprechaun in space. I can really say it's probably the only Leprechaun film alongside Three in Origins that I can actually watch and not get bored of, because I do like the feeling of it, and of course the nostalgic moment, of course, being the first Leprechaun film. And for those reasons, the first Leprechaun is at my number one. And that does it for the video, guys. I hope you guys really enjoy this rank combo. Like I said, I've been not a big old fan of Leprechaun, but I can appreciate what he was able to do for the horror genre, being the more comedy side of things. And stay tuned for tomorrow's video for episode number 25. Yeah, we're gonna be hitting my age, 25. We're gonna be tackling the Ring franchise. Now, this is gonna be a tricky one because I'm not sure if I'm just gonna be counting the American based films, or I'm gonna be counting those and the Japanese films. So it depends on what I'm going to do. But just stay tuned there for tomorrow's video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. You guys should back. Don't forget to follow me on my Instagram. Don't forget to follow me on my Twitter. And of course, guys, stay safe, everyone. And until next time, stay metal.